global economy is high on the agenda. We're encouraged to see stronger economic prospects after years of disappointing global growth. There are still many downside risks, however, and countries that have the fiscal space need to continue with structural reforms. This is vital to accelerating the sustainable and inclusive economic growth needed to end extreme poverty by 2030. We're meeting at a time when we face several overlapping crises, both natural and man-made, all of which add urgency to our mission. You and your colleagues have been reporting on them every day: conflict, climate shocks, the worst refugee crisis since World War II, and famine in parts of East Africa and Yemen, which the UN has called the worst in 70 years. With famine in particular, the world was caught unprepared again. Too often, we forget about crises as soon as they abate, leading to a cycle of panic and neglect. We're already working with the affected countries and partners to respond to the famine, and we will use every tool we have, financial and advisory, to prevent famine in the future. On Saturday, I'll convene a meeting co-chaired with the United Nations Secretary General to ensure a coordinated, effective, and well-resourced response. In addition to fragility, accelerations in technology are changing the landscape. We estimate that 2/3 of all jobs that currently exist in developing countries will be wiped out by automation. At the same time, the internet, smartphones, and social media allow everyone to see exactly how everyone else lives, which is causing aspirations to rise all over the world. I see this everywhere I go. So in the midst of these crises and with rising aspirations, we must change the way we work in development finance. We have to find new and innovative ways to reach the poor and make the world more secure and stable, and to help the world grow. Last week at the London School of Economics, I outlined how we're working to change our approach. We have to start by asking whether the private sector can finance a project. If the conditions aren't right, we will work with our partners to de-risk that project or, if needed, de-risk entire countries or sectors. This won't be easy. It will require agreement across the entire international development finance system, multilaterals and bilaterals, to move the global development architecture in this direction. But this is the only way we can act with the speed and scale that these times require. Here's the good news. There's never been a better time to find those win-win solutions. There's trillions of dollars sitting on the sidelines, earning little interest or even negative interest, and investors are looking for better returns. That capital should be mobilized to help us meet the exploding aspirations of people all over the world. And with the crises we face, our task is much more urgent than we ever thought. Now I'm happy to take your questions.
Thanks. And again, just a reminder to identify yourself and your outlet when we get to you. And I'm going to start here in the front row with this gentleman.
Ahmed Imad from Egypt. I would like to ask in Arabic language.
Yes.
Okay. سؤالي يعني حوالين تعاون البنك الدولي مع مصر في المشروعات القومية التي تستهدف مصر تنفيذها خلال الفترة الحالية والمستقبلية. كيف ترون تعاون البنك الدولي في تلك المشروعات؟
Well, I just met with President El-Sisi when he was here in Washington. As I'm sure you know, we think that Egypt is one of the critically important economies in the Middle East region, and we have a broad array of projects that we're working on. Everything from infrastructure focused to projects specifically focused on investing in people. I assured President El-Sisi that we will continue our cooperation given the importance of Egypt to the economy of the region.
Great. I'm going to go to, here, again in the front row. Okay. Microphone. Thank you.
Qin Yuntao from China Central Television. The One Belt One Road Summit is going to be held in Beijing in May, and we know you are going to attend this summit. And we'd like to know what is your expectation from this summit, and also how will the World Bank work together with the AIB and other multilateral development institutions? Thank you.
So we have a very close working relationship with the Chinese government and also with AIIB. We'll be signing another memorandum of understanding during these meetings. I will be doing so with Jin Lijun, the president of AIIB. The One Belt One Road project is an extremely important one for the Chinese government and also for us. The leadership that China is now taking in the overall world of development, I think, is unprecedented. I mean, I think China has been stepping up and illustrating that it's concerned about development not just in the neighboring countries or even along the old Silk Road, but globally. And so, not only are we engaged, for example, in a major study with China right now on the drivers of China's future economic growth, but we're partnering with AIIB already. There were two major projects that we've co-financed with AIIB in Indonesia. So our expectation is that our engagement, both with the Chinese government and with Chinese efforts at development, both through their own bilateral cooperation, but also through AIIB, will only grow going into the future. And we've discussed at great length our approach of trying to crowd in much more private sector capital, and the Chinese are very much in agreement with what we're trying to accomplish.
We're going to go to Alex Brummer there, please.
Alex Brummer, Daily Mail, London. The British government looks as if it may now be going to cut its contribution, its foreign aid budget contribution, which has reached 0.7% and is one of the largest foreign aid budgets in the world. What difference would that make, and what problems would that create for the World Bank and for the aid community in general if they send that particular signal?
Well, Alex, on the one hand, we were extremely encouraged when Prime Minister Cameron fulfilled his commitment to the 0.7. And I think that it's important for people in the UK to understand just how significant that was in terms of expanding the UK's influence in the world and the way and elevating even more the image of the UK in the world. I think it'd be very unfortunate for the UK to reduce their commitment. And I would just, through you, and I see Larry next to you, to say to the people of the UK that this the 0.7 that has been committed to is critically important, not just for developing countries, but for the future of the world. Now, I've been making this case for the past few months, and I want to be sure that all of your readers understand this. These multiple overlapping crises linked with rapidly rising aspirations. I mean, this is a specific issue, Alex. What we actually did the study. We looked at how satisfied people are and what is going to affect their overall level of satisfaction. And what we found is that access to the internet, on the one hand, increases their satisfaction in the short term, but it also raises very quickly the income to which they compare their own. So what you see is that as the internet, access to the internet expands, people's sense of what is possible goes up. And if you have rising aspirations and connect those with opportunity, you can get really great dynamism in a society. It's frankly what Korea experienced in the 1960s and 70s and 80s. But if those rising aspirations then meet frustration, we are very worried about more and more countries going down the path of fragility, conflict, violence, extremism, and of course eventually migration. Because the other thing that access to the internet does, it increases people's desire to migrate. Right? So that and I'm not talking about just aid. The DFID has done incredibly thoughtful and innovative things, like also helping us to increase the investment of the private sector in developing countries. So we need to create dynamic, growing societies that will be markets for goods from the OECD, in which opportunities are created so that these rising aspirations are not all met with frustration. So this is, I can't this is not. This is not something that's theoretical. It's happening in front of us right now. And so people have to think about aid as far more than just sort of giveaways. We think about using our resources now as facilitating a process where owners of capital will get higher return, and developing countries will get an opportunity to grow their economies and create jobs. That's the one big win-win situation in the world today, and you need organizations that can facilitate that process. Aid agencies can do that, and DFID specifically has played an extremely important role in doing that.
Great. This gentleman on the aisle, 5 rows back, please.
My name is George Uyafi from Joy FM and Multi TV in Ghana. Mr. President, I want to find out from you, what measures are you putting in place to ensure that aid that you advance to developing countries like Ghana is used effectively? Because years on, there have been questions about the effectiveness of these support and even reducing poverty in countries like Ghana. And what is your expectation of the new president? Your vice president was in Ghana recently.
Yes. So I haven't met your new president yet, but I'll be meeting very high officials from your government during this week. The question of aid effectiveness is very important. Now, we at the World Bank Group have all kinds of measures, and we audit every single project. We follow the possibility of corruption very, very closely. But also, we're trying to rethink ourselves what's the best way to support countries like Ghana in their aspirations. And one of the things that we found is that foreign direct investment often has a much higher impact, much stronger impact on improving institutions and government than aid by itself. This is why we're trying to bring together the financing we provide to governments and also the financing that comes from the private sector to create better institutions, more investment, more jobs, more economic growth in a much more synergistic way. I think that's the one thing that we need to do much more effectively than we have in the past. Because even inside the World Bank Group, the public sector side of the organization, the private sector side of the organization, for the most part, worked almost independently. Right? And now what we're going to do is try to both help institutions evolve so that we can talk about de-risking entire countries with policy reform, improving the business environment, and at the same time facilitate the movement of private capital in a way that will lead to, we hope, more economic growth throughout the developing world. So on corruption, on misuse, on loans and grants that don't give any outcomes. We've been following that for a long time. But I think the big question now for us in terms of aid effectiveness is we have got to stop fighting each other for the low-hanging fruit projects. This is what's actually happening right now. If there's some project that looks like it could be commercially viable, meaning it could be financed by the private sector, all the development agencies run after it and fight over it and try to get their money in the door so that they can get the money out of their door, right? So we've been competing with each other for the low-hanging fruit projects as opposed to stepping back and saying, the low-hanging fruit projects, we should let the private sector fund that. And then we should work on the higher-hanging fruits that will boost these economies even more. This is a complex and difficult conversation that we're having right now, but it's critical for us to have it because I think that if we don't have it and if we don't move forward in a much more coordinated way, that we'll begin to lose credibility.
3 rows back, 2 in.